So, what causes this?
Lesion. Lesion in the temporal.
We had several
Kind of
casting
seizure
directors who worked on
Look,
The
Doc, I
Exorcist
really don't
in
understand
various
how
parts of
whole
the country,
personality could change.
mostly to try and find a 12-year-old girl to play Reagan.
It can last for days,
And
weeks,
literally hundreds of girls were seen, and some of them were auditioned,
even criminal.
and it was getting down to the wire, and there was nobody. Then one day, Linda Blair was brought in by her mother. It turned out that Linda had never really acted before at all, except in school plays. When she first came to see me, I thought she was highly intelligent and sort of a really cute little kid. So I shot a test with Linda that amounted to no more than Ellen Burstyn interviewing her. And then the two of them sort of improvised a mother-daughter scene from early on in the script. And immediately I saw the dailies and I knew that we had found Reagan. There is a movie God that brings you people like that, when you least expect it and from a completely unsuspected source. As I say, there were hundreds of young women auditioned before anyone had even seen or met Linda.
It's just for a short time.
I shot most of the doctor's scenes in actual doctor's offices or at the NYU Medical Center, at the Neuropsychiatric Center, and where Dr. Norman Chase, who was the head of that department, was very helpful. The audience reaction to this particular scene has always been the same. It is the most disturbing scene in The Exorcist. It's the one that puts most people off. One of the reasons that it does is because it's portrayed so realistically. It really looks like that needle is going into her neck and into a vein and then into an artery. It's a combination of the way in which this doctor, who is an actual neurosurgeon, he's not an actor, and little Linda Blair was able to act this scene. It's absolutely brilliant what Linda does to sell this. And then again, the special effects that make it look like the blood is spurting out of there also is very well done. So an audience looks at this and they believe it, and they can feel that pain in her neck. And they can, when they hear her moaning, most of the people moan right along with her. There's no question that the film, to one extent or another, is about ritual, about religious ritual, medical ritual. So clearly there's a counterpoint between the two, and they also dovetail. Exorcism is a ritual, and so is this medical routine. Something like the arteriogram is very ritualistic in the way I saw it and presented it.
There's nothing there. No vascular displacement at all. And you want me to run another series?
I don't think so. I'd like you to see her again.
Excuse me,
The
Doctor.
nurse who appears
Just
here in
put the nose
Dr.
on the
Tanny's
phone.
office is actually Linda Blair's mother.
Got some time?
Of course.
This could now be done with a steady cam. It was a very difficult and unusual shot at that time. We simply hoisted the camera operator up on a pulley, and he was able to just pan around with the actors and do a 360-degree shot, but carrying them from one floor to another. It looked seamless and effortless, and that was the idea. These sequences that involve all of this thrashing around by Linda, they were all tested for weeks with a stunt double before we actually did it with Linda. The length of time that she spent in this harness or rig was actually quite short. It's pretty much the length that you see on the screen, and I did very few takes of it. I never did more than 2 takes, and I usually was able to achieve it in 1 take. And then, of course, she acted it so superbly. But it was done so quickly that while it was uncomfortable, it wasn't long-lasting, and there was no, physical difficulties to her. There was a lot of stuff written about The Exorcist and behind the scenes in The Exorcist, and almost everybody who wrote about it knew very little, if anything, about it. It was being written that Linda Blair was physically affected by this role. Rona Barrett, who was a gossip columnist for the entertainment industry, went on ABC television and said that Linda Blair was in a mental institution as a result of having played this part. At the time that story appeared, Linda was back in school, a straight-A student, and a champion horsewoman, winning blue ribbons and prizes in horse shows at Madison Square Garden and elsewhere. The film provoked a lot of evil into a lot of its critics. It provoked a lot of incorrect information that was passed on to the public and sort of added to the dark legend that the film contains to this day. And I would have to say that most of the stories that I saw, if not all of them, were completely made up out of whole cloth. Almost every other horror film that has ever been made has a distance between the viewer and the filmmakers. You know you're watching a horror film. You know it by the way it's lit, by the way the angles are chosen, by the performances, by the outrageous nature of the action line. The Exorcist, I wanted to be completely believable in every frame. And so a lot of care and attention was given to make all of the details as good as we possibly could and as plausible as we could possibly make them.
At least it would eliminate certain other possibilities.
A number of the sound transitions came about in the editing process through trial and error, but most of them were preconceived. I mean, I knew that I wanted the sounds, the percussive noises that take place in this arteriogram sequence to echo the sound that's pounding in Father Merrin's brain while he's sitting at a chaikana or a little tea restaurant in Iraq.
No.
So yes, that was calculated, but the way we actually achieved it came about through trial and error.
Sure.
And of course, again, every one of these loud scenes is immediately followed by a completely silent soundtrack. Everything in the Exorcist film is intentional. I had no idea what the effect of any of this stuff would be, but I can tell you that it's all planned. This is as planned a film as I've ever made. There are a lot of things in almost every film that come about through improvisation or through luck. A large part of the chase scene in The French Connection, it actually just happened. But there's nothing that just happened in The Exorcist. Everything is planned.
Did she finish school? Why'd you ask?
I think it's time we started looking for a psychiatrist.
At this particular point in the film, Chris MacNeil is becoming physically and mentally sick from what's going on with her daughter. And, of course, rather than comb and brush her hair, she decides to cover it with a shawl instead. And you begin to get a sense that she's letting herself go, that her appearance is less important to her physically and physiologically. And you begin to see the toll that her daughter's illness is taking on her. Her attitude gets a lot sharper, too. Her mentality becomes much more difficult to deal with, and she really becomes a kind of a mean person as a result of what's happening to her. The meanness comes out of the insecurity and the uncertainty as to what is the cause of her daughter's illness. This area here, of course, has no subliminal imagery. You could have. I mean, the temptation here is to hide little demons in the darkness here. And probably if they were making the film today, that's what they would do, is to pump it up. But I tried to hold on to realism as long as I could. By this time, a little realism has gone a long way, and not only our characters, but the audience is looking beyond it for some other kind of solution.
Sharon! What the hell do you mean going off and leaving Reagan by herself? Are you crazy? Her window's wide open. The whole room is freezing.
Didn't he tell you?
Didn't who tell me?
Burke, isn't...
What's Burke got to do with it?
Look, there wasn't anybody here, so when I went to get the Thorazine, I had him stay with her, and...
Oh,
I should have known better. I'm sorry.
I guess you should have.
How were the tests?
We have to start looking for a shrink. Hi, Chuck. Come on in.
There are very few opticals in the picture.
Heard what?
There's a fade out coming at the end of this scene. There are a couple of dissolves. There's an occasional fade to black. I tried not to use any dissolves or fades, but to move quickly from one scene to another. In straight cuts, as we say,
Oh, God.
without any real manipulation of the audience. Even though the film does seem to have an interesting pace, it's probably very slow for today's audience in terms of what they're used to seeing. Today's audience is not used to seeing so much characterization before anything happens. They usually want the spills and chills in the first reel.
You comfortable, Ray?
We don't give them that. What we give them instead is a very slow development with an extremely creepy atmosphere leading up to the potentiality that something astounding is going to happen. And then it does. I would hope that this style can return and that the story becomes more important. I'm not sure that it has or that it will. I think there's been a significant lowering of the standards of film storytelling. And I find most of the screen directors working against the material rather than with it, as any intelligent person would do if confronted with a lot of this stuff, which is totally superficial.
I'm speaking to the person inside of Reagan now. If you are there, you too are hypnotized. I must answer all my questions. Come forward and answer me now.
You hear a combination of her voice along with the demon voice. And that's because the demon has not completely taken her over. There's still something left of her personality at this point. Not much, but something. And so you hear very clearly the demon voice, and then you also hear her own voice very clearly. Later on, her own voice is completely usurped by the demon voice. Jason Miller is probably the most unusual casting in the film. He had never been in a film before. He had written a play. It was his first produced play. It was called That Championship Season, and it subsequently won the Pulitzer Prize for Drama. I had seen the play when it was in previews at the Public Theater while I was casting The Exorcist. And I thought that there was an aura of failed Catholicism that came right off the stage. An extreme intelligence, a kind of ironic cynicism about the world, a brilliance, of course, but also a sort of mustiness.
Have we met?
I saw the play, was very moved by it, and I asked my casting director if she knew the guy who wrote this play, and she said, no, I know who he is, and she told me something about him. At the time, I think he was delivering milk in Queens or somewhere. And so I said, I'd like to meet this guy, just to talk to him. Anyway, I met with Jason in my hotel room in New York at that time. We had a very bad meeting. He was sort of uptight. He didn't know why I wanted to see him. He had not read The Exorcist.
Well, you know this director.
That's how it started. And I was not very impressed with him. I thought he was, had no verbal skills whatsoever. He was kind of off-putting. But he told me, in fact, that he had studied for the priesthood, that he went to Catholic University for 3 years, and he sort of dropped out. He was unable to see it through, and that, of course, was the quality inherent in Father Karras. Anyway, I went
I
back
know, I
to
read it.
California, and we cast another actor
This
to play Father Karras.
desecration in the church,
We actually
you
had a
think this
deal
has
with
anything
another
to do with witchcraft?
rather well-known actor at that time.
Maybe.